I woke up to complete darkness, and the sound of my air conditioning dying mid-hum on what had to be the hottest August night Phoenix had seen in years. The digital clock on my nightstand was black. The ceiling fan had stopped spinning, and within seconds I could already feel the heat starting to creep back into my bedroom. I grabbed my phone and checked the time, 3:15 in the morning, and saw a notification from the power company saying there was a widespread outage affecting the entire neighborhood with no estimated time of restoration. Perfect. I'm Tyler Anderson, and I'd been living in the Sonoran Palms community for about 2 years now. It's one of those planned neighborhoods in North Phoenix where every house looks vaguely similar. The HOA rules are stricter than most rental agreements, and your neighbors are either your best friends or your worst enemies depending on how well you follow said rules. I fell somewhere in the middle, mostly keeping to myself and doing my job as a software engineer from my home office. I'd purchased a portable generator 6 months earlier specifically for situations like this, not just for comfort, but because I needed to keep my home servers running for work. That generator sat in my garage, fully fueled and ready to go. I pulled on some shorts and a t-shirt, grabbed my keys and headed out to the garage. The oppressive heat hit me immediately once I left the air-conditioned bubble of my bedroom. Even at 3 in the morning, it had to be at least 90 degrees outside. I could hear other generators already humming to life in the neighborhood as I rolled up my garage door manually. My generator was right where I'd left it, a nice Honda EU 7000 IS that had cost me a pretty penny but was worth every cent for moments like this. I wheeled it out to my driveway, positioned it a safe distance from the house according to the manual, checked the fuel level, and pulled the starter cord. It roared to life on the second pull. Within 15 minutes, I had my extension cords run through the garage and had my refrigerator, a couple of fans, and my critical work equipment powered up. The house wouldn't be cool, but at least I wouldn't lose hundreds of dollars worth of food, and I could keep working in the morning if the power wasn't back. I sat on my front porch with a bottle of water, enjoying the slight breeze and watching the occasional car drive by with their headlights cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw her. Sharon Whitmore was the current president of the Sonoran Palms HOA, and she was exactly what you'd picture when someone says, HOA Karen. She was probably in her mid-50s, always had her blonde hair styled in that speak-to-the-manager cut, wore decorative scarves even in 100-degree weather, and seemed to exist solely to make everyone else's life more difficult. She drove a white Mercedes SUV that she treated like it was a tank, and she had a special laminated badge she wore around her neck during her neighborhood patrols that said HOA President in bold letters. And she was walking straight toward my house at 3:30 in the morning with a flashlight. I stood up from my porch chair as she approached, already knowing this wasn't going to be pleasant. Sharon had a particular walk when she was on a mission, quick, purposeful strides with her chin up and her mouth set in a thin line. Tonight was no different. Tyler, she called out before she even reached my driveway. That generator needs to be turned off immediately. I felt my jaw clench. Good morning to you too, Sharon. And no, it doesn't. There's a power outage in case you haven't noticed. She stopped at the edge of my driveway, shining her flashlight directly at my generator like it was some kind of crime scene evidence. Section 12. Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that generators may only be operated during daylight hours and only with prior written approval from the board. You're in violation. Sharon, it's 3:30 in the morning and 95 degrees outside. My refrigerator is full of food that's going to spoil, and I have work equipment that needs power. Nobody wrote those bylaws thinking about emergency situations. Rules are rules, she said, crossing her arms. If we make exceptions for you, we'd have to make exceptions for everyone. The generator is too loud. It's disturbing the peace and you don't have approval. Turn it off or I'll be forced to issue you a fine. I looked around at the dark, quiet neighborhood. I could hear at least 4 other generators running from various houses, all of them roughly the same volume as mine. You're going to fine everyone with a generator or just me? I'll be addressing each violation as I come to it, she said primly. Right now, I'm addressing yours. Turn it off. No, I said flatly. I'm not turning it off. Fine me if you want, but that generator is staying on until the power comes back. Her face flushed even in the dim light from my flashlight. Excuse me, did you just refuse a direct order from the HOA president? I refused an unreasonable demand at 3 in the morning during an emergency, I corrected. Go home, Sharon. Get some sleep. Deal with this in the morning if you really think it's that important. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the gears turning in her head. Then she turned on her heel and marched back toward her Mercedes without another word. I watched her drive away and shook my head, going back inside. I'd deal with whatever fine she wanted to throw at me later. Right now, I needed to try to get a few more hours of sleep before sunrise. I woke up at 7 to my phone ringing. The power was still out and my generator was still humming along outside. The caller ID showed it was my neighbor from 2 doors down, Marcus. Hey man, Marcus said when I answered. You might want to check your front yard. Why, what's wrong? Just go look. I pulled on my shoes and walked outside and immediately saw what he meant. There was a bright orange violation sticker plastered on my front door and another one stuck to my generator itself. I walked closer and read the one on my door. Violation notice. Unauthorized generator use. Fine. $500. Equipment must be removed within 24 hours or will be subject to confiscation. I ripped the sticker off and crumpled it up. $500 for running a generator during a power outage. This was absolutely ridiculous. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of both stickers, then went back inside to send an email to the HOA board. If Sharon thought she could just bully me into compliance, she had another thing coming. The power stayed out all day. By noon, it was 108 degrees outside, and even with the generator running fans, my house felt like an oven. I worked from my makeshift setup in my living room, taking calls with clients and trying to ignore the sweat running down my back. The power company updated their estimate to say power would be restored by 6 that evening, which gave me some hope. At around 2 in the afternoon, I heard a vehicle pull into my driveway. I looked out the window and saw Sharon's Mercedes, along with another car I recognized as belonging to Dennis Fletcher, the HOA vice president. Both of them got out and walked up to my front door. I met them outside before they could knock. Tyler, Sharon said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We're here to discuss your violation and give you one more opportunity to comply before we take further action. Dennis, a balding man in his 60s who always looked vaguely uncomfortable around Sharon, gave me an apologetic look. Tyler, look, I know it's hot and the situation isn't ideal, but Sharon has a point about the bylaws. Maybe we can work something out where you can use the generator but only during certain hours. The power outage doesn't operate on a schedule, Dennis, I said. My food is already starting to go bad even with the generator running. You want me to turn it off during the hottest part of the day? That makes no sense. The bylaws exist for a reason, Sharon interjected. If we don't enforce them consistently, they become meaningless. You have until 6 o'clock tonight to turn off that generator and remove it from view, or we will take action to remove it ourselves. You'll do what? I stared at her in disbelief. You can't just take my property, Sharon. That's theft. It's enforcement of community standards, she said coolly. When you bought your home here, you agreed to abide by our rules. That includes giving the HOA the right to remove items that violate those rules after proper notice has been given. We've given you notice. 6 o'clock. Your choice. They left before I could respond. I immediately got on the phone with a lawyer friend of mine, Rachel Morrison, who specialized in property law. I explained the situation, and she laughed in disbelief. She's bluffing, Rachel said. The HOA bylaws might give them the right to fine you, maybe even put a lien on your property if you don't pay, but they absolutely cannot come onto your property and take your belongings. That's criminal trespassing and theft, and no HOA bylaw supersedes actual criminal law. Tell her if she touches your generator, you'll call the police and press charges. You think she'd actually try it? Some of these HOA people get drunk on their tiny bit of power, Rachel said, but nobody's that stupid. Send her an email right now. Tell her you've spoken with an attorney and make it clear that your property is off limits. That should scare her off. I took Rachel's advice and sent a strongly worded email to the entire HOA board, carbon copying my attorney. I explained that while I was willing to discuss the fine and work toward a reasonable solution, any attempt to remove my property would be met with criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. I thought that would be the end of it. 6 o'clock came and went. The power company pushed their estimate back to midnight. My generator kept running. I made myself dinner using my electric stove since I had it plugged in and settled in for a long evening. Around 8 o'clock, just as the sun was setting, I heard a noise outside. I looked out my front window and froze. Sharon's Mercedes was parked on the street in front of my house, and Sharon herself was walking up my driveway. She had someone with her, a younger guy in his 20s or 30s, wearing a company polo shirt and pushing a dolly. They were heading straight for my generator. I bolted out the front door. "Hey, stop! What do you think you're doing?" Sharon turned to face me with a satisfied smile. "It's past 6 o'clock, Tyler. You were warned. We're removing the violation from the premises." "The hell you are." I positioned myself between them and my generator. "This is my property. You have no right to take it." "I have every right as HOA president," Sharon said. "This is Derek. He works for a property management company that handles HOA enforcement. He's here to help me remove your generator and store it until you've paid your fines and agreed to comply with the bylaws." Derek looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. He was just a guy doing a job, probably not even aware he was being asked to commit a crime. "Derek," I said directly to him, ignoring Sharon. "I'm telling you right now, if you touch my generator, you're committing theft. I will call the police immediately and you will be arrested. Is whatever Sharon is paying you worth a criminal record?" Derek's eyes widened and he looked at Sharon uncertainly. "Madam, if he's saying it's theft, it's not theft," Sharon snapped. "I have the authority to do this. The bylaws are very clear." "The bylaws don't override Arizona criminal law," I said firmly. "Sharon, I sent you an email from my attorney. You're trespassing on my property right now, and if you take my generator, that's theft. Both are criminal offenses. Leave. Now." Sharon's face was turning red. "You can't talk to me that way. I'm the HOA president. And I'm a property owner who's telling you to get off my land before I call the cops," I said. I pulled out my phone. "I'm serious, Sharon. Leave or I'm dialing 911 right now." Derek had already started backing up with his dolly. "Madam, I can't help you with this. He's threatening police involvement. I'm not risking my job or a record over an HOA dispute." He loaded his dolly back into his truck and drove off, leaving Sharon standing alone in my driveway. She stared at me with pure fury. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You're going to regret this, Tyler." I'll make your life in this neighborhood absolutely miserable. Just leave, Sharon." She stalked back to her Mercedes and peeled out of my neighborhood like a teenager. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, and then went back inside. I immediately called Rachel and told her what had happened. "Document everything," she said. "Take photos, write down times, keep every email. If she tries anything like that again, you call the police immediately. Don't wait, don't warn her, just call them." What she just did was attempted theft, and the fact that she brought someone with her makes it even worse. You might want to consider getting a camera set up watching your property. I took her advice seriously. I went online and ordered a couple of outdoor security cameras with night vision and motion detection, paying extra for next-day delivery. Then I sent another email to the HOA board, this time describing what had happened and formally demanding that Sharon cease all contact with me regarding the generator issue until we could schedule a proper board meeting to discuss it. The power finally came back on around 11 that night. I shut down my generator, disconnected all my extension cords, and wheeled it back into my garage. I set up my cameras the next morning, mounting one pointing at my driveway and front yard, and another watching my backyard and garage. Both were connected to cloud storage, so even if something happened to the cameras themselves, the footage would be saved. For the next week, things were quiet. I got a formal fine notice in the mail for $500, which I planned to contest at the next HOA meeting. I went about my normal life, working from home, going to the gym, doing grocery shopping. But I had this nagging feeling that Sharon wasn't done yet. Then, exactly 8 days after the power outage, we had another one. This time it happened in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday. I was working on some code when everything suddenly shut off. I checked my phone and saw another notification from the power company about a widespread outage, estimated restoration time unknown. The temperature outside was already over 100 degrees and climbing. I didn't hesitate this time. I went straight to my garage, pulled out my generator, and set it up in the exact same spot on my driveway. I got everything connected and powered up within 20 minutes. But this time, I also made sure both of my security cameras were positioned to have clear views of the generator. If Sharon tried anything, I'd have video proof. I didn't have to wait long. Around 6 o'clock that evening, just as it was starting to get dark, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from my front camera. I pulled up the app and watched in real time as Sharon's Mercedes pulled up to my curb. She got out, looked around quickly, and then walked straight up my driveway toward my generator. I was already moving toward my front door when I saw her bend down and start examining the generator. Then, to my absolute shock, she reached down and turned off the fuel valve. My generator sputtered and died. "Are you kidding me?" I yelled, throwing open my front door. Sharon jumped back, startled. She clearly hadn't expected me to come out so quickly. "Your generator was creating a noise disturbance," she said, recovering her composure. "I was simply enforcing community quiet hours." "You just trespassed on my property and tampered with my equipment," I said, pulling out my phone. "I have you on camera doing it. Leave right now, Sharon, or I'm calling the police." "You're being ridiculous," she said, but she was already backing toward her car. "This is an HOA matter, not a criminal matter. You're on my property without permission, touching my belongings. That's trespassing and vandalism at minimum. This is your last warning." She got in her car and drove away, but I could see the anger in her face even from a distance. I restarted my generator, checked that everything was working properly, and then downloaded the video footage from my camera. The whole thing was captured in clear detail: Sharon walking onto my property, shutting off my generator and only leaving when confronted. I sent the video to Rachel immediately. File a police report, she said after watching it. Right now, tonight. This establishes a pattern of harassment and shows she's willing to come onto your property and interfere with your belongings. If she escalates further, and I think she will, you want this documented. I drove to the local Phoenix Police Department precinct and filed a report. The officer who took my statement, Officer Martinez, watched the video and shook his head. HOA disputes, he said with a tired sigh. We get these all the time. Most of them are civil matters we can't really do anything about, but this one crosses the line into criminal behavior. She's clearly on your property without permission, and she's tampering with your equipment. I'll write this up and you'll get a case number. If she does anything else, call 911 immediately, especially if she tries to take your property. Will you talk to her? I asked. Maybe if she hears from an actual police officer that what she's doing is illegal, she'll back off. I can have someone do a welfare check and give her a warning, Officer Martinez said. But honestly, people like this usually don't listen until they're actually facing charges. Keep your cameras running, keep documenting everything, and don't engage with her if you can avoid it. I went home with my case number and felt slightly better knowing it was officially documented, but that feeling didn't last long. The next morning, Sunday, I woke up to my phone buzzing with multiple motion alerts. I pulled up my camera app still half asleep and felt adrenaline jolt through me instantly. Sharon was in my driveway again, and this time she wasn't alone. She had the same guy from before, Derek, with his dolly, and they were attempting to load my generator onto it. I didn't even get dressed. I ran outside in my pajama pants and t-shirt, phone in hand, already dialing 911. Stop, I shouted. Get away from my property. Sharon and Derek both froze. My generator was already tipped back on the dolly, clearly about to be removed. Tyler, this generator has been deemed a violation and is being removed, Sharon said, but her voice wavered slightly. She knew she was caught. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice came through my phone. Yes, I need police at my address immediately, I said loudly, making sure Sharon could hear every word. I have 2 people on my property attempting to steal my generator. One of them is Sharon Whitmore, my HOA president. I have video footage of the theft in progress. Sharon's face went pale. Put that phone down. This is not theft. This is HOA business, sir. What's your address? The dispatcher asked. I gave her my address on Desert Willow Drive. They're trying to load my generator onto a dolly right now. I've told them multiple times they don't have permission to be on my property or take my belongings. I filed a police report last night about this same person trespassing yesterday. Case number. I rattled off the case number Officer Martinez had given me. Officers are on their way, the dispatcher said. Stay on the line with me. Are they armed? Do you feel you're in immediate danger? No weapons that I can see, I said, but they're actively trying to take my property. Derek had already started backing away from the generator, his hands up. Madam, I'm leaving. I'm not getting arrested for this. He rolled his empty dolly back to his truck and took off before Sharon could say anything. Sharon stood her ground, though I could see her hands shaking. You're making a huge mistake, she said. The HOA will sue you for everything you have. I'm doing my job. Your job doesn't include theft, I said. I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. You were warned multiple times, Sharon. You did this to yourself. 2 Phoenix PD patrol cars pulled up within minutes. 4 officers got out, and I recognized one of them as Officer Martinez from the night before. That's him, Sharon said immediately, pointing at me. He's been violating HOA bylaws repeatedly, creating noise disturbances and refusing to comply with direct orders. I'm here to enforce community standards. Officer Martinez walked up to me first. Mr. Anderson, you're the one who called this in. Yes, sir, I said, still holding my phone with the 911 dispatcher on the line. This is Sharon Whitmore, my HOA president. She's been harassing me about my generator since the first power outage over a week ago. Last night, she came onto my property without permission and shut off my generator. I filed a report with you about that. This morning, she came back with someone to actually remove the generator from my property. It's all on camera. That's ridiculous, Sharon interjected. I have every right as HOA president to remove items that violate our bylaws. The HOA documents give me that authority. Madam, I'm going to need you to calm down, another officer said, stepping between us. Let's sort this out one step at a time. Mr. Anderson, do you have footage of what happened this morning? I pulled up my security camera app and showed him the video. The footage was crystal clear: Sharon and Derek entering my property, going straight to my generator, tipping it back onto the dolly, and beginning to wheel it away before I came outside. The timestamp showed it all happened within the last 15 minutes. Officer Martinez watched the video, then looked at Sharon. Madam, did you have Mr. Anderson's permission to enter his property this morning? I don't need his permission, Sharon said, her voice rising. I'm the HOA president. The bylaws clearly state, Madam, HOA bylaws don't supersede criminal law, Officer Martinez said firmly. You don't have the right to enter someone's property without permission and remove their belongings, regardless of what your HOA documents say. That's trespassing and theft. This is absurd. Sharon's face was turning bright red. You're supposed to help enforce community standards, not side with someone who's breaking every rule we have. We enforce the law, the other officer said. And based on this video and Mr. Anderson's previous report, you've committed criminal trespassing at minimum and attempted theft. We're going to need you to come with us. The color drained from Sharon's face. What? No, you can't arrest me. I'm on the HOA board. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Officer Martinez said, and he began reading Sharon her Miranda rights as his partner moved to handcuff her. This is insane, Sharon shrieked. Tyler, you're going to pay for this. The HOA will destroy you. We'll fine you until you're bankrupt. We'll put a lien on your house. Madam, I strongly suggest you stop talking, Officer Martinez said as he guided her toward the patrol car. Sharon continued to yell threats and insults the entire way until she was finally secured in the back seat. The other officers took my statement, got copies of all my video footage including the incident from the previous night, and gave me a new case number. They told me Sharon would be booked on charges of criminal trespassing and attempted theft, and that I'd be contacted by the prosecutor's office if they needed any additional information. After the police left, I stood in my driveway for a long moment, just processing what had happened. My generator sat exactly where I'd placed it, still running, keeping my refrigerator and fans powered during the continued outage. My quiet Sunday morning had turned into a circus, but at least it was over, or so I thought. The next morning, Monday, I woke up to dozens of emails and text messages. Word had spread through the neighborhood about Sharon's arrest, and apparently, the HOA board had held an emergency meeting the night before. Dennis Fletcher had sent me a formal email apologizing for Sharon's behavior and informing me that she had been suspended from her duties as president pending a full investigation. The email also stated that my fine was being waived and that the board would be reviewing the generator policies to make them more reasonable during emergency situations. But that wasn't the end of it. I also had 3 voicemails from Sharon's personal phone, all left at various times during the night after she'd apparently posted bail. The first one started off relatively calm, with her insisting this was all a misunderstanding and that she'd just been doing her job. The second one was angrier, accusing me of ruining her reputation and destroying the HOA's credibility. The third one, left at 3 in the morning, was downright unhinged. She was crying and screaming, saying I destroyed her life, that she'd lose her position, that her neighbors would never respect her again, and that this was all my fault for refusing to follow simple rules. I saved all 3 voicemails and forwarded them to Rachel, who told me to immediately file for a restraining order. "This woman is not stable," Rachel said. "Those messages constitute harassment, and combined with her pattern of behavior, a judge will definitely grant you at least a temporary order of protection." I spent Monday morning at the courthouse filing the necessary paperwork. By Tuesday afternoon, I had a temporary restraining order requiring Sharon to stay at least 100 yards away from me and my property, and to have no contact with me whatsoever. A court hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later to determine if it should be made permanent. The power came back on Tuesday evening, and I gratefully shut down my generator and returned it to my garage. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal, though I noticed a lot more people waving at me and stopping to chat when they saw me outside. Apparently, Sharon hadn't been popular with most of the residents, and many people were quietly grateful that someone had finally stood up to her. Marcus, my neighbor, came over with a 6-pack of beer on Wednesday evening. "Dude, you're a legend," he said as we sat on my back patio. "Sharon has been making everyone's lives miserable for 3 years. Last summer, she tried to fine me because my grass was a 1/4 inch too long according to her measurements. A 1/4 inch. And don't even get me started on the time she tried to ban basketball hoops because they were visual clutter. I honestly just wanted to keep my food from spoiling," I said with a laugh. "I didn't set out to become the neighborhood hero." "Well, you are. Half the street is planning to show up to the next HOA meeting to vote her out permanently. Dennis is already talking about running for president himself, and he actually seems sane." Over the next week, I learned more about Sharon's reign of terror as HOA president. The restraining order hearing came 2 weeks after Sharon's arrest. I showed up with Rachel and brought printed copies of all my documentation, the videos, the emails, the voicemails, the police reports, everything. Sharon showed up with her own lawyer, an expensive-looking guy in a tailored suit who clearly specialized in civil litigation rather than criminal defense. The hearing lasted about an hour. The judge listened to both sides, reviewed all the evidence, and watched the security camera footage. Sharon's lawyer tried to argue that she'd been acting within her authority as HOA president, and that this was simply a civil dispute blown out of proportion. But the voicemails she'd left, especially the unhinged 3 a.m. one, combined with the video evidence of her repeatedly trespassing and attempting to steal my property, made it an easy decision. The judge granted a permanent restraining order, valid for 3 years. Sharon was ordered to stay at least 100 yards from me and my property at all times, and to have absolutely no direct or indirect contact with me. The judge also strongly suggested that she resign from her position with the HOA, though he couldn't legally order that. Sharon's criminal case took longer to resolve. She was initially charged with 2 counts of criminal trespassing and 1 count of attempted theft. Her lawyer tried to get the charges dismissed, arguing that the HOA documents gave her certain rights regarding property violations, but the prosecutor wasn't buying it. The video evidence was too clear, and the fact that she'd continued to trespass, even after being warned by police, made her behavior indefensible. I had to give a deposition about a month after the initial arrest, where I walked through the entire timeline of events. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Huang, seemed particularly interested in Sharon's escalating behavior and her refusal to back down even when directly told she was breaking the law. People like Miss Whitmore are unfortunately common in HOA disputes, Jennifer explained to me after the deposition. They get a small amount of authority and they let it go to their heads. They genuinely believe they're above the law because they're enforcing community standards. But the moment they step onto private property without permission or attempt to take someone's belongings, they've crossed from civil dispute into criminal behavior. Your security footage and documentation make this a slam dunk case. Sharon's lawyer eventually approached the prosecutor about a plea deal. She would plead guilty to 1 count of criminal trespassing and 1 count of attempted theft in exchange for the second trespassing charge being dropped. She would receive 2 years of probation, have to pay restitution for my legal fees and the cost of my security cameras, complete anger management counseling, and perform 100 hours of community service. The plea agreement also required her to immediately resign from all positions with the Sonoran Palms HOA and to refrain from holding any HOA board position for at least 5 years. I was fine with the plea deal. I didn't particularly want to go through a full trial, and the terms seemed fair. Sharon would have a criminal record, she'd lose her HOA position, and she'd have to actually face consequences for her behavior. The plea hearing was brief. Sharon stood in front of the judge and quietly answered his questions, agreeing to the terms of her probation. She looked smaller somehow, less fierce than she'd been during our confrontations. Her lawyer had clearly told her to keep her mouth shut and show remorse. When the judge asked if she understood that violating her probation could result in jail time, she simply nodded and whispered, "Yes, Your Honor." Back in Sonoran Palms, the HOA had undergone major changes. Dennis Fletcher was elected as the new president, and he immediately set about reforming the most ridiculous rules. The generator policy was rewritten to allow homeowners to use generators during power outages without prior approval, as long as they followed basic safety guidelines and noise ordinances. Several other overly restrictive rules were also modified or eliminated entirely. The board also hired an independent accountant to audit the HOA finances, which revealed that Sharon had indeed been misappropriating funds, not a huge amount, but enough that the board considered pursuing civil action to recover the money. Dennis came by my house about a week after Sharon's plea hearing. "I wanted to apologize in person," he said. "I knew Sharon was overzealous, but I didn't realize how far she'd gone. I should have stood up to her earlier, but honestly, she was intimidating. She'd threatened to sue anyone who disagreed with her, and most of us just went along to avoid the hassle." "I appreciate that," I said, "but you did help in the end, and from what I hear, you're doing a good job as president." "I'm trying," Dennis said with a tired smile. "It turns out running an HOA is a lot of work when you're actually trying to help people instead of just bossing them around." Who knew? Life slowly returned to normal over the following months. Sharon moved out of the neighborhood about 6 months after her conviction, whether by choice or because she couldn't stand facing everyone anymore. I never found out. A nice young family bought her house, and they turned out to be great neighbors. My security cameras stayed up, though I rarely had to check the footage for anything more serious than package deliveries. The generator incident became a bit of a neighborhood legend. New residents would hear the story and always wanted to meet the guy who got the crazy HOA president arrested. I mostly just laughed it off. I hadn't set out to be a rebel or make a statement about HOA overreach. I just wanted to keep my refrigerator running during a power outage on a hot Arizona night, but I did learn some valuable lessons from the experience. First, documentation is everything. Without those security cameras and my careful record keeping, it would have been my word against Sharon's, and who knows how that would have turned out. Second, knowing your rights matters. If I hadn't talked to Rachel early on and learned that Sharon's threats were largely empty, I might have given in and let her bully me. And third, sometimes standing up to unreasonable authority figures is worth it, even if it's uncomfortable in the moment. The HOA still sends me newsletters and meeting minutes every month. Dennis runs things much more reasonably, focusing on actual maintenance issues and community improvement rather than petty enforcement of minor rules. The neighborhood pool gets cleaned regularly, the common areas are well maintained, and people generally seem happier without Sharon's constant surveillance and nitpicking. I kept the generator, of course. It sat in my garage, always fueled and ready to go. We had 2 more power outages over the next year, both brief, and I ran it both times without any issues or complaints. Other neighbors bought generators too, having learned from that first brutal outage that it was better to be prepared. We joke about our generator club when we'd see multiple units running during outages, all of us safely keeping our food fresh and our homes slightly less miserable in the Arizona heat. About a year after the whole incident, I ran into Sharon's former lawyer at a coffee shop. We'd never been formally introduced, but I recognized him from the court hearings. He recognized me too and surprisingly came over to talk. "You know, in 20 years of practicing law, I've never had a case quite like that one," he said, shaking his head. Sharon was absolutely convinced she'd done nothing wrong. Even after we negotiated the plea deal, even after she completed her anger management classes, she still believed she'd just been doing her job and that you were the one in the wrong. "Some people just can't admit when they've crossed a line," I said. "The thing is," he continued, "if she just backed off after that first confrontation, none of this would have happened. She could have issued you a fine, you could have contested it through proper channels, and it would have been a normal HOA dispute. But she escalated and escalated, and once she actually came onto your property to take your stuff, well, that's when it became criminal." I told her that multiple times, but she wouldn't listen. It was a strange conversation, but it gave me some closure. Sharon hadn't been some evil villain, she'd just been someone who'd let a small amount of power go to her head, who'd convinced herself that enforcing rules was more important than treating people with basic respect and following the law herself. It was almost sad in a way. These days, I'm still living happily in Sonoran Palms. My work is going well, my house is comfortable, and my relationship with the HOA is professionally cordial. Dennis and I aren't best friends or anything, but we wave when we see each other and occasionally chat about neighborhood stuff. The whole generator incident feels like ancient history, though newcomers still bring it up sometimes. I did make one change to my garage, though. Right next to where my generator sits, I hung a framed printout of the judge's order granting my permanent restraining order against Sharon. It's not because I'm proud of having gotten someone arrested, I'm not. It's there as a reminder that sometimes you have to stand your ground, even when someone tries to use their authority to push you around. It's a reminder that rules and policies have limits, and those limits are defined by actual laws, not by how loudly someone asserts their perceived power. Marcus thinks it's hilarious. "Dude, that's the most petty thing I've ever seen," he said when he first noticed it. "I love it." "It's not petty," I protested, though I was grinning. "It's educational, a learning opportunity." "Sure it is. Next, you're going to frame the arrest warrant. I don't have a copy of the arrest warrant yet, Marcus said, and we both laughed. In the end, the whole situation taught me a lot about HOAs, about standing up for yourself, and about the importance of knowing when to compromise and when to dig in your heels. Could I have handled things differently? Maybe. I could have just turned off the generator that first night and avoided the whole mess. But then Sharon would have just found another reason to target me or someone else. Some battles are worth fighting, not because you want conflict, but because the alternative is letting unreasonable people make everyone else's lives harder. The Sonoran Palms community is better off without Sharon running things with an iron fist. The HOA actually functions the way it's supposed to now, maintaining common areas, organizing neighborhood events, handling legitimate issues rather than serving as Sharon's personal fiefdom. And I like to think that other people in the neighborhood learned the same lesson I did. Document everything, know your rights, and don't let anyone bully you just because they have a title. My generator still sits in my garage, ready for the next emergency. But now it represents more than just backup power during outages. It's a symbol of that whole crazy experience, a reminder of the time I went toe-to-toe with an HOA Karen and came out on top. Not because I was trying to be difficult or make a point, but simply because I refused to let someone steal my property. And honestly, I'd do it all again. The community has continued to thrive under new leadership. Dennis eventually stepped down as president after 2 years, having done exactly what he set out to do: stabilize things and make the HOA functional again. A woman named Patricia took over after him, and she's been doing an excellent job continuing the reforms Dennis started. The neighborhood has even won a couple of local awards for community improvement and resident satisfaction, which would have been unthinkable under Sharon's leadership. I sometimes wonder what Sharon is doing now. I heard through the neighborhood gossip mill that she moved to Scottsdale and got a job doing something in real estate. I hope she learned something from the whole experience, though based on what her lawyer said, I'm not sure she did. Some people are just wired to see themselves as always right, always the victim, always justified in whatever they do. Maybe the court-ordered anger management helped. Maybe it didn't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. What I do know is that my little corner of Phoenix is a lot more peaceful these days. I can run my generator during power outages without fear of someone trying to confiscate it. I can work from home without worrying about surprise HOA violations being plastered on my door. And I can enjoy my house and my neighborhood without constantly looking over my shoulder for the next petty enforcement action. The whole experience also taught me to be more involved in community affairs. I started attending HOA meetings regularly, not because I particularly enjoy them, but because I realized that these organizations only become tyrannical when good people check out and let the power-hungry ones take over. I serve on the Architectural Review Committee now, helping approve requests for home improvements and additions. It's boring work mostly, but it's important. And I make sure we're reasonable and flexible, focusing on legitimate concerns about property values and neighborhood aesthetics, rather than getting hung up on minor details that don't really matter. Marcus jokes that I've become part of the establishment, but he attends meetings too now. So do a lot of other residents who previously ignored HOA business. Sharon's downfall was a wake-up call for everyone about what happens when you give someone unchecked authority and don't pay attention to what they're doing with it. The funny thing is, the whole generator incident ended up improving my life in unexpected ways. I got to know my neighbors better. I learned about property law and HOA regulations. I became more engaged in my community. And I gained confidence in standing up for myself when someone tries to push me around. Those are all good things, even if they came about through a frustrating and stressful situation. Rachel, my lawyer friend, still brings it up sometimes when we get together. "That case was such a slam dunk," she'll say, laughing. "I've had clients dealing with HOA harassment for years, and they never get the kind of clear-cut evidence you had. That security camera footage of her actually trying to take the generator was perfect. Her lawyer didn't have a leg to stand on." "I got lucky," I always respond. "If I hadn't installed those cameras when I did, it would have been much harder to prove what she was doing." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Rachel insists. "You were smart. You documented everything, you sought legal advice early, you knew your rights, and you didn't back down when she tried to intimidate you. That's not luck, that's just being smart and prepared." Maybe she's right. All I know is that I'm glad it's over and that things worked out the way they did. On the occasional scorching summer night when the power goes out, I still wheel my generator out to the same spot on my driveway. It fires up reliably, keeping my home livable during the brutal Arizona heat. And every single time I do it, I think about that night when Sharon first tried to make me shut it down, and I feel a little surge of satisfaction knowing that I stood my ground. The generator hums along, doing exactly what I bought it to do. My cameras keep watch, recording everything just in case. And I sleep soundly knowing that my property, my rights, and my peace of mind are secure. It's a good feeling. Life goes on in Sonoran Palms. The sun rises over the desert every morning, the temperature soars every afternoon, and the community continues to function smoothly under reasonable leadership. Sharon Whitmore is nothing but a cautionary tale now, a story that older residents tell newer ones about what happens when HOA power goes unchecked. And my generator sits ready in my garage, a silent testament to the fact that sometimes the smallest battles matter the most. Because at the end of the day, it was never really about the generator at all. It was about the principle that you have the right to use your own property on your own land for legitimate purposes, and that no amount of HOA bureaucracy or power tripping should be able to override that basic right. It was about standing up to a bully who thought her title gave her unlimited authority. And it was about proving that the law still matters, even in disputes as seemingly trivial as neighborhood generator use. I learned all of that from a simple power outage on a hot August night. And while I wouldn't want to go through the stress and hassle of it all again, I'm grateful for the lessons it taught me. Sometimes the most important moments in life come from the most unexpected situations. My generator is ready. My cameras are recording. And I'm exactly where I want to be in my home, in my neighborhood, living my life on my own terms. Sharon Whitmore couldn't take that away from me then, and nobody can take it away from me now. That's a pretty good ending to what could have been a much worse story.